Welcome to our 103rd podcast. Today we're talking about monitoring your transformation. Why do it, why it's often overlooked and undervalued, and how to get started if you're not sure how. What's one thing you can do to make sure your hard work is actually working? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants to explore and challenge workplace issues and to build better ways of working. It's a blend of theory and practice, grounded in real-world experience, working with organizations of all sizes across a wide range of industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want fresh ideas about the workplace, or just enjoy listening to consultants talk candidly about how to make work more effective and more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our podcast. It's our 103rd podcast. Ben, can you believe this? Like, we keep saying this after we got to that 100
No, I think
mark.
it's fantastic. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
How cool is that?
Yeah. So I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant. This is Ben Kleinman, a certified change management professional. And
Hi, Rich. Hey, everyone.
we have been talking a lot about our knowledge to performance tree model, which is featured in TD magazine through the Association of Talent Development, right? ATD. And Ben, the one thing we've talked before about some of the foundational inputs, the roots. We talked some about the trunk, right? The development drivers. We talked about feedback loops, but one of the things we haven't actually talked about was the fruit. The fruit. And
it's an apple.
It
shiny
is
red apple.
It is not just a shiny red apple. This, my friend, this is an envy apple. It's my favorite apple on the planet. And I thought appropriately it's an envy apple because you want a workplace that other people envy, right? So, see where I went there? Yeah.
Nice.
All right.
Nice.
Yeah, but the fruit of our tree is the outcomes and performance measures that we're striving for. There's a reason for the change, after all, right?
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking of it as the fruit is the outcome of what we're doing, and the measures, the metrics, the key performance indicators, all of those things that we want to be monitoring the health of our tree, right, and getting it to a point where it will bear fruit, and we have the greatest likelihood, the highest probability of success that it will bear the fruit that we want. So that envy apple is ripe and red and juicy and crisp, or whatever you like your apples to be, and super envious, like the most envious apple we can envyify. And so that apple, we want to be monitoring our soil system. We want to be monitoring our trunk. We want to be the health of our branches, all of that kind of stuff as we go. And so typically when we see a project roll out, if you're implementing a new software system, let's say, there's going to be some kind of project plan to implement the technology. But I guess in my experience, I don't always see that there's a plan mapped out for how we're going to measure and track adoption or health of our people who are going to be using this new technology system. Sometimes you'll see it, more often you'll see it as part of the rollout of that technology system. It could be a process change. It could be a new organizational structure. It doesn't have to just be technology, but I often see it where there's some token granting of, we should probably keep track of whether people are using this new system or not. But then I so often see it tail off as soon as that process change is rolled out, the system goes live, the new organizational structure is announced, everyone has their new boss. All of that whole project, the whole initiative just seems to end. Everybody goes back to where they came from, and we're just hoping and praying that we've managed to do enough that this new way of working is instilled in everyone. And it is so rarely the case that it is just magically instilled in everyone. And that's where I feel like we lose an opportunity
Mhm.
to keep monitoring and measuring so that we can keep course correcting, just like you would course correct if your technology system was late or over
Sure,
budget. You
sure.
would want to do that in the same way if the health of your adoption is not getting you to where you need to be, or if over time the health of your people or the success of whatever thing you were trying to do is not where you want it to be. So that first crop of apples might be super, super envious, but the next crop of apples might just be a little bit envious, or they might not be as shiny, or they might not be as red, or they
Right,
might be a little bit smaller, or you might get a little bit less robust of a crop. And so it's those kind of things that we want to make sure because you're putting in all this time, money, effort, resources, whatever, attention to getting this tree to produce these beautiful, shiny, envious apples. You want to make sure that it's doing that over time and not just hope that it's a one and done and good luck to you,
right,
Richie
right.
Appleseed.
Boy, you give Ben a metaphor, and he just runs with it, man.
I'm sorry. I was
That's
yabbering for a long
no,
time, so
that's
I'll
great.
stop.
That's great. No, that's perfect. Well, it's interesting that you say that though about like how in projects that may be something that's overlooked because in like PMI, the Project Management Institute, right? Their PMBOK, the Project Management Book of Knowledge,
Yeah.
explicitly has in the fourth stage of the five stages of a project, monitoring and controlling.
Right.
But
Right.
and so all you project managers out there, bless your heart for putting that into your plan. But yeah, how often does that actually continue
Well, that's
on,
what I'm
right?
saying.
That's
It's
it.
often in a project plan, so
Right.
you're rolling out a new something, and it's part of that rollout, but so much
Hmm.
of change management, and it's also monitoring, measuring, all of that is very much baked into the ACMP standard, the
Sure.
Association for Change
Absolutely.
Management Professionals standard of change management, and it's there, but it's just so many things. You can only do so much in any given situation, and that's often one of the things that I see just sort of we've implemented, we've gone live, we've had our pizza party, good luck to you. And
Right.
it's just the one of those things that sort of tails off. And so, yes, you're absolutely right in that initial initial swath of planning and implementing, we do see decent metrics and monitoring and things like that because
Right.
everyone wants to see that this thing is going to get delivered on time, on budget, and it's going to meet its go live date, and we're going to have that rah rah pizza party memo announcement, you know,
Sure.
bright lights, all that kind of newspaper article stuff. But then after that, you know,
It makes
who's
sense.
monitoring the health of our workers after that in this new way?
Sure.
Because so much of change management goes beyond just that initial role. And
Absolutely.
so I would imagine it's the same for, um, in that traditional organizational design. If you're building out the design of a new organization from scratch or a new organizational unit that's carving off, or you're merging and you need to figure out how are we going to blend these two, you're
Right.
thinking through that. Hopefully you're thinking through how do we want to make sure that not just on day one our people are ready to go and they've hopefully met each other at some point, but we're going to make sure that everyone is happy and doing their best work going forward, even
Right.
if our intent in 2 years is to reduce headcount or gain some efficiencies. We want to at least be planning for some way to keep our people as effective and efficient as possible and
Sure.
as happy as possible. I mean, we've talked so many times before about how important that is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Ben, why don't we do this? Let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about maybe some of the elements of those the outcomes and performance. Yeah, outcomes and performance. Like, what are we actually looking for in this?
Yeah.
And then maybe in the last segment, we'll talk about some of those tools and techniques. Of
Right.
how we can
Right.
do that.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. And I'll be quiet for the next section so
You do
you can
not be
have a chance.
quiet. You talk about those envy apples all day, Ben. All right. We'll be right back.
Oh, hi. I'm Hermie, the HR hermit crab. So, I have a quick question. Have you ever had that one employee who knows how everything works, but if you ask them to write it down, they say, "Oh, it's easy," and then don't write anything down? Yeah, me too. Try getting Hermione to share how she sets up her spreadsheets. Sheesh. Here's the thing, when knowledge stays in people's heads, performance gets wobbly. Training doesn't stick, new hires struggle, and suddenly everyone's asking, why did this used to work? That's why we talk about the knowledge to performance tree model as featured in TD Magazine from Harmonious Workplaces. Knowledge forms the roots of an organization's value. If you don't capture it before people retire, resign, or burn out, performance doesn't grow. You see, you can buy new systems, you can launch new initiatives, but without the roots, you mostly grow frustration. Anyway, I'm Hermie saying that Harmonious Workplaces is here to help you keep the good stuff from walking out the door. Make change your friend. Bye.
And we're back. So, Ben, we've been talking, we started talking
I've been
about
talking. You've been very patient and listening, but we've been
uh,
talking about, yes,
keep,
monitoring
keep,
metrics.
keep rolling out the wisdom, Ben. We've got, we've got this element of our knowledge performance tree, outcomes of performance, the fruit of what we're looking for, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, before we came in here, right, that we have this monitoring and controlling section of any project, but putting this into regular operation, oftentimes it either fails or maybe it's not fully complete, fully adopted, for the long term. But
Yeah.
what are some of those indicators of how well things are done? So yeah,
You're thinking about indicators, Rich, in terms of how do we know our initiative is on track, or how do we know our initiative is going off the
yeah.
rails, that
Well,
kind of thing?
maybe first with what are we monitoring, right? I think that's one thing, and as a system, here where we have inputs, that we have conversion, that we have the outputs for it, right? Basic system thinking, right? The on the outputs part, right? What is that thing that we are checking for defects, for um areas of improvement, that type of stuff, right? And I know, like in our tree, for instance, we have things like effectiveness and efficiency, which you had mentioned before, which is a break here, customer satisfaction, employee engagement, innovation and advantage. But there are other bespoke
Yeah.
and more and universal,
Hmm.
elements that we measure.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, we've mentioned it earlier in the show. I think that the canonical ones are basically, are you on time and are you under budget?
Absolutely, sure.
Almost everything else falls to the wayside if you had to boil things down in terms of an implementation. So things that you were talking about, the project manager approach, their body of knowledge, all of that, I think is largely geared towards, are we on time? Are we on budget?
Yep.
And I think change management factors that in terms of the ACMP standard, but I think there's also quite a bit more that the change management world might look at, and possibly, you would have a much better sense than I would of organizational development or industrial organizational psychology and the types of things they would want to be measuring in terms of change management is going to look at adoption, training,
Hmm.
is going to look at stakeholder engagement. And so your world might also look at health of the company, health of the employee or team, things like that. So there's
Sure.
probably stuff that you'd be looking at there. I would also be wanting to break it down into leading indicators and lagging indicators. And so those are the types of things we want to have a blend of, and no more than 3, 5 tops. I mean,
That makes sense.
you know,
Sure,
you
sure.
you, um, you overwhelm people very quickly if you have a whole litany of metrics that you're tracking and all of that.
Yeah, and that, I mean, and from a from a science standpoint, if we try to do, an analysis where we're measuring multiple different factors at the same time, it is very hard to control what is going on there, especially in an open system
Hmm.
where you have all these external factors. We're not working in a lab, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, that makes a lot of
Hmm.
sense. To really distill that down, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
in your experience, have you? So I mean, we oftentimes hear about KPIs, right? Those key performance indicators, right? eh, have you seen where they've used things like banding and like within certain ranges of performance levels that this is what success looks like. This is what moderate success looks like. This is what failure looks like. Have you seen that type of thing in your change?
Yeah, yeah. I think it depends on the initiative. And so there might be things where you're very much looking for a range of, um, let's say we're onboarding a bunch of new employees to a process. You're going to see some metric that says 98% of people completed their training within the required time frame. But then
Right,
after that, you're going to start to want to measure how many people are actually using this and what does good look like. And you could boil that down to, well, we had 98% of people do their training within the required deadline. And then we want to see 6 months later, 98% of people following the new process and not making any errors, right? So
right,
that's often somewhat aspirational. And so you might want to have a range of, we'd like to see somewhere north of 85% of people, and somewhere between 85 and 95 would be considered good number of people using the new process, not making errors, right? That kind of
right,
thing. So, it sort of depends on your initiative. If you're looking about widgets and you're making a new thing, a new physical thing, or delivering a service, you could see a range of, prior to our change initiative, we had certain range of defects over the course of a month. Now we want to reduce that with this initiative. We ideally like
sure,
to see that defect range decrease. And it's never
right,
going to get quite to zero, but you might want to see it decrease to, instead of, let's say, 3% error rate, you might want to see it be something like 1.5 to 2% error rate, or
right.
whatever it is. And so it's that kind of thing. And so single point target range, I think it really just, so much of this depends on your organization, your initiative, your time frame, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I mean, and like I think we talked a little earlier about there's the planning process and then there's the monitoring process, but like we always talk about being intentional
Yeah,
about what you're going to measure, right?
yeah.
And a part of that is what are those ranges that are acceptable? Because like in the pharma industry, I'm sure you're really going for Six Sigma as much as possible, right? Where you're 3.4 defects per million or less, and
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's
I mean,
right,
same
right.
thing in certain manufacturing industries. You're talking about, making brakes for a car, or you're talking about, everyone, the classic joke is, well, we're not going to the moon with this, or we're not building a rocket ship. Well, if you are building a rocket ship, you probably have very tight tolerances.
That's right.
All of that quantum mechanics, quantum energy, that's, all of those tolerances are very, very
Very
tight.
tight. Yeah.
And so all of those things you want to be controlling very closely. And so your
Sure.
range is going to be very narrow.
Yep. And I think part of those foundational inputs that we talked about, the roots of a system where we're taking knowledge and turning it into performance, has to do with bringing in some of those SMEs, those subject matter experts, into
Mhm.
where are we at now? I mean, that should be uh, baselining should be part of your inputs to begin with, but those SMEs can help us to understand, what can we expect coming out of this, right? I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of wishing that goes on, I think, um, but having some kind of evidence-based analysis, if that makes
Mhm.
sense, or bringing an
Yeah.
engine and go figure, bringing in an engineer to help with like figuring out what do we need to do in order to control this, right? Makes a
Right.
lot of sense. But at the same time, there are other things where your tolerance can be significantly less, and we oftentimes hear about the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, where
Right.
if we have if we're at 80% by the time we're 6 months in here, hey, that's all right, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it could be a fool's errand to chase that last 20%. And
sure,
so it really just depends on your situation
yeah,
for sure.
right on.
I just had this idea and run with me here. We're talking about knowledge to performance, the tree of knowledge transfer, all of that great stuff. What if we take this approach and apply it to measuring knowledge transfer in terms of
Oh,
really concretizing this? How
right,
would we take this idea? Many people across, certainly the manufacturing industry,
right,
but in many other industries, you have a lot of more senior folks aging out. Silver tsunami is something most people have heard of at this point,
absolutely.
where the workforce is aging and rapidly retiring in great numbers. And so let's say we want to be measuring that. We want to be monitoring the transfer of knowledge to either newer workers or workers that have been in the company but haven't had the chance to learn that new skill or that new thing. So
Yeah,
that might be a really good kind of thing to concretize this.
I love that. Why don't we do this?
When we come back,
That's right. We'll be right back. In a world where leadership needs clarity and action, and HR gets left out of the loop, one hermit crab steps in to save the day, only to be shut down by management. From the creators of Hermie the HR Hermit Crab and the Harmonious Workplaces podcast comes a new shell-shocking adventure, Out of the Loop Into the Fire, or HR Hung Out to Dry. This book blends workplace satire with evidence-based lessons, reminding leaders that culture, trust, and people strategy don't exist as extras. They form the foundation of lasting success. Whether you work as an HR professional, a leader, or just someone who has survived a few too many staff meetings, Hermes stories will make you laugh, think, and maybe even change the way you see your workplace. Purchase Hermie the HR Hermit Crab, Out of the Loop, Into the Fire, or HR Hung Out to Dry, now available on Amazon and Ingram Spark. Shop now at harmoniousworkplaces.com/HermieHRCrab. That's harmoniousworkplaces.com/HermieHRCrab.
Ha! Big change of Fred.
And we're back. All right, Ben, cliffhanger before we went to the break is how do we concretize this concept, right? And really using knowledge performance as a way of doing this, right? And kind of coming up with what are, like you said, like 3 to 5 things that we're going to really monitor in a
mhm.
process like this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great. And just spitballing off the top of our heads, I think this is a good exercise so we can think about the strategy component of it.
Right.
In terms of what is our goal. Our goal is to not retain all of these senior folks for the next 20 years. That's not
Sure.
realistic. Okay, let me step back. What is our realistic goal? That might be our goal, but that's not realistic, right? So what is
Sure.
our goal? Let's say ensure that 90, I'm going to make it up, 90% of the people that are retiring out of our company have transferred knowledge in an effective way to other workers who
Right.
are going to be at our company, most likely going to be at our company for more than 5 years.
Sure.
Okay, so they're not going to transfer it to their buddy who's retiring in 6 months. There's got to be some effective way to transfer it so that the knowledge sticks,
Right.
and there's got to be some way to know that it's a comprehensive set of knowledge. You're never going to transfer everything that someone's been in a company for 30 years, but how do you transfer enough so that you have continuity of operations, so that you don't have significant gaps in whatever that knowledge was, so that you have just enough knowledge to say, okay, I didn't really get this from Bob or Jane is retiring, but I think I know where to go based on everything that that person did or wherever that person kind of had their locker or whatever it is. So
Sure.
some kinds of things like that might be your goal. And then let me pause there. Does that seem like a reasonable strategic goal?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
to ensure continuity. Okay.
for
So then
sure.
you start thinking about the planning aspect of it, and your project plan is going to say, well, we got to sit Bob and Jane down and figure out everything they know and document it and blah, 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 blah. Figure out who's going to get trained, figure out how to transfer that knowledge. And then we're going to have a knowledge transfer day when everything is going to be transferred. And we're going to set
Right.
meetings along the way. And it's going to be like every 3 days or daily. I'm gonna sit with Bob or I'm gonna sit with Jane and just watch everything they do, and eventually they're gonna teach me how to do it, and then I'm gonna do it, and they're watching me, and then they're not gonna watch me, and I'm gonna do it, and we're gonna see how it goes, and then at some point, pizza party, everybody's done.
Right on.
Projecty plan kind of stuff.
Right.
You look
Right.
like you're gonna say something.
Well, I mean, I think, from an IO perspective, industrial organizational psychology perspective, I think
Yeah,
and I mean, this is also business basics, right? Just to some effect, but um, job there's work analysis begets job analysis, right? And so the work is from a strategic level, what is that basic work package that needs to be done in order to produce the the customer's requirements, right? I mean, that's ultimately that's quality, right? Is meeting those customer requirements. Um, so understanding that and then putting that into the context of how is senior level, you know, Bill or Mary handling what they do to achieve that quality, right? And so you're looking for those top performing subject matter experts, the ones that know how to, know when to do the Fonzie, kick the machine or
on the
whatever.
pinball. Yeah,
Right, right. Yeah. But, but in order to do that, like you really have to know what it is that you're striving to do, in a manufacturing capacity.
right.
I've
Right.
seen where, there's a coating put on a specific type of cable, and there's somebody who is doing that exceptionally well to the point of where like this is a structural piece that is going to have to last for many many years. How then this person's output has been highly effective, and you actually can relate that to specific bin numbers that for that particular set of products that was created. So you can actually, and some companies don't do this, but if you could trace it back to the SME that was actually doing this and achieving those goals, and then it's how did you do this? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely,
Yeah.
completely. Yeah, yeah,
So, um, yeah, and then so we're talking about some of those foundational units, right?
right, right.
Um, but I can't help but to think then some other elements that could be looking at is the knowledge transfer part, the development drivers, that the trunk of our tree, right? What would come from that? If I look at like if I think about the Kirkpatrick New World model of training, where we want good reaction from the people who are learning, so if they're if the people who are learning are like, I'm just kind of going through the motions, or they're not
Sure,
sharing all
sure.
this stuff with me, right? So
Yeah,
that reaction is a part of it. Then the knowledge transfer itself
right.
through testing, right? Simulation, like you said, now I learned how to do this. Now I have to make it is my quality what it should be, right? So there's that element, and then there's the behavioral part of are they receiving ongoing coaching? Are they receiving the rewards that they need to keep everything moving? Are they um are they receiving the feedback that's necessary to keep that? So there's the behavioral aspect, and then that should give us the outcomes, the performance
hmm
part
hmm
that
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, you're talking about some great stuff in terms of engagement of both the trainer and the trainee,
right.
motivation of the trainer and the trainee. the skills and ability. So I might have the knowledge. You might show me how to plant a tomato plant, but I might be the worst cherry tomato planter in the world, and no amount of training is going to get me to be able to plant that in a way that is growing and making healthy cherries,
That's
right?
right.
So, or cherry tomatoes. So there's that component as well. Like you have to factor in all of that. And so those are great things. Hopefully, some of that is addressed in your planning and you're trying to align your senior folks that are retiring out and your mentees or trainees that are going to be absorbing all of this so that there's some kind of alignment there in terms of
Sure.
not just you're a body, you're in this seat, you have to learn this and you better learn it well, or anything quite as drastic as that. Hopefully there's
Sure.
some ability to try to match the right people with the right roles so that you do have that longevity where people are saying, yeah, this is something I really want to do. I want to be the next master cable coder at this
Yeah. Yeah.
company.
Sure.
And I want to
Sure.
take it to even the next level because I have some ideas that, based on new technology or just my own experience as
My
a cable
right.
person or a coder person, how to do this a little bit differently. And maybe it's more effective or lasts longer or has a lower cost profile or whatever it is.
Sure.
It's that kind of thing. You want to line that up.
Right. Right. And
Yeah,
some of the ways
absolutely.
that we can measure some of this, right, are surveys at the end of. So surveys are a very popular
Mhm.
way of measuring some things, right?
Yeah.
So things
Yeah.
like our that reaction that we talked about, right, at for that knowledge transfer. Did they do they feel like they have received um, adequate training? Do they feel confident? So we're measuring their
Right.
self-efficacy.
Right.
So how their self-efficacy being like their confidence level, right? And
Mhm.
that they other things that we can also measure. We talked a little bit about this before we started the show. Is like the employee engagement aspect, right? And
Mhm.
there are some really good um, valid and reliable instruments that are out there for that.
Right.
Some of them that
Right.
are offered, but like you know, the Society of Human Resources Management has several in their
Mhm.
toolkits here, but other third party or companies offer things that can
Sure.
be tailored,
Sure.
right?
Sure. And I think the more that you can measure stuff and get some mixture of qualitative, like the surveys, can lead to quantitative data, but you also want some stuff that's pretty hard quantitative data,
That's
right? So
right,
if someone is making a new widget, you want to see that they have made that widget to spec within quality tolerances.
right.
It's sort of binary in that sense that either
Sure,
like I either planted the cherry tomatoes and they made tomatoes or they died on the vine. And so
right.
it's kind of binary there. And you want to see that is effective as well. And so um, you would love to have a mix of leading and lagging indicators. You'd love to have a mix of quantitative and qualitative. I think in almost every case that I can think of, there's always a component of someone checking in with someone else. And so
Hmm.
there's that personal kind of discussion, dialogue, water cooler talk, whatever you want to call it, that there is a personal check-in that's you can get some of that from surveys and you'd like to try to tease that out from surveys across a larger number of people, but there's always going to be that element of let's just check in with Bob or with
Sure,
Jane.
sure.
Let's check in with their team and see how do people feel about this really. And
Right.
it's often one of those things that can be very informative. The challenge there is that you don't swing into the world of rumors and base all of your everything on rumors. Like somebody said that they didn't learn squat from this course.
Sure.
Well, okay, now we got to redo the whole training course and we got to figure out who's the new lead on this and who are we getting to be the master trainer and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Slow down, check in with people, look at your data, and then take a better look at that before you go too far there.
Right. And I think, Ben, we'd be remiss in not mentioning, because it enters into every conversation nowadays, the use of technology and somewhat specifically artificial intelligence to help with some of these monitoring aspects, because we have an unprecedented level of digital feedback tools that give us within those quality specifications and the like, right? We've got machines that can visually inspect widgets coming out at
Oh yeah, for
breakneck
sure,
speeds, right?
for sure. Yeah.
And we have artificial intelligence that I've we've used in the past to be able to, or even currently, right, where we can monitor. It's so some of it's very good at monitoring patterns and identifying where we have opportunities for improvement, right? And also where do we have opportunities to learn, to add improvement to, places where it's not working so well, right? And so artificial intelligence is one of those things that could really help, especially when you can integrate that into the human part of things and how your technology is helping to monitor them. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Cool.
Um, the the last thing that I wanted to bring up, Ben, because I know we're like right on time here, is I think effectiveness and efficiency can be done with that you know pre that analysis, that pre-treatment analysis, post um treatment or post analysis, right? Like what do we baseline versus the performance we get afterwards. Customer satisfaction is one of those things that, like, net promoter scores, NPS and stuff like that, how
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
people come back and rebuy and all that,
Right. Would they refer you to someone else? That kind of thing.
yeah. But one thing that maybe it's a good topic for another show is talking about innovation. I can't help but to think of Robert Snyder, his being on our program, right? And even
Mm-hmm.
Russ Lang, right, talking about some of the innovation that they've discussed. That is a huge differentiator for organizations, and is something that really can come out of, it can be that envious apple, or that apple of the envy of other people, right? That
Right. Right.
could be there. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
It sounds like a good one for another show.
yeah. Might be a good one.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Ben. Well, we got to put a bow on this thing. So
Good. I think for sort of that, like one thing that people could do is just start with a quick look at what are you trying to do and how would you know if you've achieved it? And then start to peel that back and find one or two metrics that would allow you to say pretty definitively, are we on track? Are we
mhm.
staying on track? And if you're struggling with that, it's often helpful to bring in an external eye who can just be a new set of eyes on it or a neutral set of eyes on it and just give you some ideas. We have our workplace scorecard that can help with some of those things. There are tons of others that Rich, you mentioned, are out there in terms of assessing things, and lots of best practices out there. So not incredibly hard to get started. And I would favor starting with something as opposed to trying to get perfect right out of the gates. And then you can always adjust over time.
Yeah, yeah. That scorecard, by the way, is at harmoniousworkplaces.com/scorecard. And it's
Easy
a
peasy.
there you go, right? So go there, check it out. It is a great way for you to get a snapshot, right, of how you perceive this. And you can even have other people in the organization take that and then combine those
Yeah.
sentiments, right? So
Yeah.
all
Cool.
right, Ben. Well, folks, thanks a million for joining us on this 103rd episode of the Harmonious Workplaces podcast. Please like, share, comment, and let us know what you think. Until we meet again, make change your friend. Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find all episodes, resources, and ways to connect with us at www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love your feedback. Please rate, review, share, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And don't forget to add Harmonious Workplaces to your favorites so you're notified when new episodes are released. Again, visit us at www.harmoniousworkplaces.com.